The Cold War. A sunken Soviet submarine carrying nuclear warheads. The CIA. 3 miles of pipe. And Howard Hughes. This is a tale of subterfuge, covert operations, astonishing engineering on a colossal scale, and a mission to achieve the impossible. This is the story of Project Azorian. The year is 1968. Tensions are high with America and Soviet Russia locked in a silent war. Ballistic missiles are aimed at population centres. Children hide beneath the desks at school. And the doomsday clock is in motion. American and Soviet submarines silently glide through the oceans like modern sea monsters, armed with the capability to raise cities to ashes. And somewhere in the Pacific Ocean, around 1,500 miles northwest of Hawaii, a Soviet Golf II class submarine, K-129, carrying 3 nuclear ballistic missiles, has just gone dark, and both sides are on the hunt. You can't overstate the value of capturing an enemy submarine. You'd be forgiven for believing the missiles were the greatest prize. It's an easy conclusion to reach, and you wouldn't be entirely mistaken. But the real value came in the form of intelligence. Code books, logbooks, communication equipment, acoustic signatures. If you can break your enemy's codes, you can know what they're planning and when. If you can identify the submarine by sound alone, you can track the movements throughout the oceans. No surprises. Priceless. So the loss of the K-129 presents the Americans with an extraordinary opportunity to find the cheat codes to World War III. Their objective is simple to describe and nearly possible to achieve. Find the submarine, recover it, and do it all without anybody noticing. It's a gambit that could cost everything. If the Soviets discover what you're doing, the clock strikes midnight, your favourite city becomes glass, and for a few glorious, terrible moments, our green-blue wonder shines brighter than the sun. And then, the light of humanity fades once more, into the safety and obscurity of darkness. The Pacific Ocean. 3 miles beneath the waves lies the grave of K-129 and her crew. More than a half-century later, nobody knows exactly why K-129 sank. What we do know is that, on the 8th of March 1968, somewhere in the darkness of the North Pacific, the ironclad Leviathan, on a 3rd Pacific patrol, made her final dive. Whatever happened next was sudden, catastrophic and unrecoverable. The vessel and her 98 brave and honourable mariners were dragged into the abyssal plain, a place where light does not reach, for no man was meant to dwell therein. Blessed rest to the 98 sailors, brothers, sons, fathers. The sea cares not for flags. Many theories have been proposed. One suggests an explosion caused by hydrogen gas, released from the submarine's lead-acid batteries. If not properly ventilated, hydrogen can accumulate and ignite with devastating consequences. Not ideal when you're thousands of feet beneath the surface, with the weight of an ocean bearing down on you from every side. Others have suggested a snorkel malfunction. The theory goes that the submarine slipped below safe snorkel depth, began taking on water, and a combination of equipment failures and human error led to the disaster. Some accounts point to the fact that many members of the crew were relatively inexperienced, though this explanation has never been universally accepted by either the American or Russian navies. Russian sources have also suggested a collision with the USS Swordfish. Whether that theory holds water is still debated. I mean, I'm no expert, but it seems self-delete adjacent, given the pressures acting upon both vessels. At those depths, the ocean amplifies every mistake. Whatever the cause, the K-129 and her crew were dragged into the abyss. The Americans knew something had died. They just didn't know what. Imagine 3 nuclear missiles, the codes to your enemy's country, sitting in the dark 3 miles down, and nobody knows about it. Meanwhile, within the SOS US monitoring network, analysts detect an acoustic event consistent with a large underwater explosion, or a rather large bang, roughly 1,000 miles northwest of Oahu, Hawaii. The ocean is vast, and 3 miles beneath the surface is an alien environment. The Navy's hydrophones had heard the death of the K-129. They just didn't know it yet. The sound was triangulated, logged and filed away. Just another mystery ping in a silent war. The Soviets knew they lost the submarine, of course. They just didn't know where. They threw much of their Pacific fleet into the search. Frantic patrols, distress calls. Nothing. The Pacific swallowed the K-129 whole, and after weeks of searching, Moscow gave up. The crew were declared lost, the submarine unrecoverable, case closed. Except it wasn't, because the Americans had something the Soviets didn't. A search box, an area, not an exact location, not exactly coordinates neatly stamped on a chart, but a piece of ocean small enough to search. Enter the USS Halibut, a specially modified spy submarine, fitted with thrusters, skids, cameras and a towed camera sled known simply as Fish. Her mission: find a needle in a black, crushing haystack. And in August 1968, after months of painstaking grid searches, Halibut found it. On the abyssal plain, broken into pieces, sat K-129, crushed and alone, but intact. Enough. And somewhere inside her rested the missiles, the codes, the secrets of the Soviet Navy, and the crew. Now the Americans had to ask the impossible question: how do you steal a submarine from 3 miles beneath the ocean without starting World War III? The answer: you don't send a submarine, you build a ship that shouldn't exist. Langley, Virginia, CIA headquarters. Deputy Director Carl Bucket and his team pitch a plan so audacious it sounds like science fiction. The goal? Build a 63,000-ton ship with a hole in the bottom, lower a giant claw 3 miles down, grab a section of Soviet submarine and lift it back to the surface, and do all of it while pretending you're just mining the ocean floor. And the cover story: Howard Hughes, billionaire, inventor, aviation pioneer, brief subject of our last video, eccentric, and according to the official story, Hughes wanted to mine manganese nodules from the seabed, and the ship was called the Hughes Glomar Explorer, 618 feet long, built around a hidden central opening known as a moon pool. Inside sat a massive capture vehicle nicknamed Clementine. The lift system consisted of 3 miles of pipe, and each section screwed together one at a time, and at the very bottom sat the claw, a mechanical claw roughly 200 feet tall. The entire assembly was stabilised by sophisticated heave compensation systems designed to counter the movement of the sea. This wasn't just engineering, this was hubris with a budget, around $350 million in 1974 dollars, several billion in today's money. The Soviets watched, of course, they weren't stupid. Spy ships shadowed the Glomar, helicopters flew overhead, they circled and observed, and they questioned. And the CIA smiled and continued drilling fake holes in the ocean floor. July 1974, at the target site, the operation begins. Piece by piece, the pipe descends, 3 miles of steel stretching into the darkness. The Clementine claw reaches K-129. It closes around a large section of the wreck, and it begins the impossible ascent. 16,500 feet. 10,000 feet. The Soviets are watching, and the world has no idea. And then, roughly 9,000 feet below the surface, it breaks. Several arms of the capture vehicle fail. The wreck is too fragile and too heavy, and much of the submarine slips free and falls back into the abyss, lost once again. The Glomar reels in whatever remains, a part of the forward section, some torpedoes, and the remains of Soviet sailors. The missiles were gone, and as for the intelligence haul, well, the CIA has never fully said. Publicly, the mission was only considered a partial success. But there was one remarkable act. The 6 Soviet sailors recovered from the wreck were buried at sea with full military honours. The sea cares not for flags. So, did the Azorian fail? Well, yes and no. Yes, because the United States failed to recover most of the submarine. The missiles were lost, and most of the valuable intelligence targets may have been lost as well. But no, because they proved it could be done. They lifted part of a submarine from 3 miles beneath the ocean, and they built a ship decades ahead of its time, and the technology developed for the Azorian would influence future deep-sea engineering and offshore operations. But the real story is what happened afterward. The secret begins to leak, reporters start pulling at threads. The CIA pleads for silence, national security, international stability, the usual language of the Cold War. And for a time the story is held back, and then the Los Angeles Times breaks it, and suddenly one of the most ambitious covert operations in history isn't secret anymore. The Soviets find out, and the world finds out, and the response? Silence. No retaliation. No missiles. The doomsday clock doesn't move. Why? Because both sides understood the game. You spy, you get caught, you don't start the apocalypse over it. The Cold War was a war of shadows, not flames. And as for Howard Hughes, he was barely even involved. The CIA used his name, his reputation, and his public image as the perfect cover. The Glomar Explorer would eventually move on to other work in the offshore industry, and it was still in operation until very recently. But the K-129 remained where she fell. Most of her anyway, along with her missiles, and her secrets, and the crew. So Project Azorian was a failure that succeeded, a secret that changed nothing and everything. It showed us how far nations will go to understand their enemies. 3 miles down, billions of dollars, and it showed us something else, that even in the darkest, coldest moments of the Cold War, there was still room to bury a sailor with honour. The ocean took K-129, the CIA took a piece of her, but nobody took the war, and for that, the light of humanity didn't fade into darkness. At least not that day. But what was on K-129? And why did the United States want her so badly? To this day, some researchers believe the CIA recovered more intelligence than it ever publicly acknowledged, and the agency has never fully revealed everything that came back aboard the Glomar Explorer. Maybe that's a story for another time. Take care, stay curious. Thank you.